Thank you for taking the time to listen in today. And I trust that when we're finished, you'll have a better understanding of how to keep your slicer operating safely and at its peak performance. Today, we'll review a few of the popular Hobart slicers that are in current production, some tips and reminders on training your operators, how to properly clean your slicers, preserving your slicer's operational integrity, how to recognize and troubleshoot some common symptoms of mechanical and component distress. The Hobart offers a wide variety of commercial slicers to satisfy all of your specific food preparation requirements. The HS slicer series of heavy-duty slicers feature a 13-inch clean-cut knife with a cobalt alloy edge, a patented removable knife, tilting removable carriage, zero knife exposure, and a top-mounted Borzon sharpening system. The Centerline Edge series of slicers deliver proven performance, reliability, and versatility for medium-duty slicing. And the Burkle slicers are sensible solutions for commercial kitchens made to work consistently and reliably. The purpose of this webinar is to explain various preventative maintenance procedures that are universal to all slicers, but will feature the Hobart Heavy Duty HS series in our discussion to help emphasize specific components that we'll be talking about. If you scan the exploded view component descriptions here, for both the automatic and manual models of the HS slicer, you can see they both have all the same general components, the exception being the leg stand lever on the automatic model. With that said, we can start with the importance of operator training. A properly trained operator is a confident operator, I think. They also have a higher propensity to be safe operators who know the equipment and respect what it does for them or what it can do to them. So always ensure that there's an updated instruction or operational manual readily available on site for your slicer. That the operators, they need to complete the initial training outlined in the operation manuals provided with the slicer and available on the Hobart Parts website. We all know the proper training ensures peak performance. It improves, the safe operation of the slicer. In addition to training, I've noted a few general precautions every operator should be aware of. They should always reference and follow your slicers, specific instruction manual. Wear cut-resistant gloves, especially when handling a knife blade. Never use steel wool. That obviously scratches the surface. And never submerge the slicer completely or place the machine in a dishwasher. That may be obvious, but at the same time, we've seen it happen, so I would caution against that. The safety features of the HS series are notable here. At this point, these are some safety features that I thought would be helpful to make note of in addition to the precautions we just reviewed. All HS slicers have what we call a no-volt release, which requires the slicer to be restarted after a power interruption. Additionally, the HS8 and the HS9 slicers feature a gauge plate interlock that prevents the product tray from being tilted or removed unless the product tray is pulled all the way forward into the home position and the gauge plate is closed. Another feature associated with the HS7, 8, and 9 slicers is what we call home start, which once again requires the product tray to be in home position, pulled all the way forward, in other words, before the slicer can be started. The close to stop feature turns the slicer off when the gauge plate is closed. The auto shut off will automatically shut off the slicer after 30 seconds if it's not being used. Finally, the patented removable knife removes easily and allows you to clean the knife, sink, or a dishwasher. Again, don't take a power washer to it. We're going to take a moment here to poll our audience. How often are you currently cleaning your slicer? Okay. Well, thank you for your replies there. We'll talk about those soon. Now that we've covered the importance of operator training, precautions, and safety features, let's talk a little bit about the importance of cleaning. Obviously, cleaning is important for preventing bacteria growth and contamination. Helps prevent E. coli and other harmful bacteria contamination. It also prevents cross-contamination or food transfer, flavoring transfer. So cleaning between food products like meat and cheese, or dedicating a slicer to each type of food would obviously help promote and prevent cross-contamination. It also improves the slicer uptime. While cleaning the slicer frequently may not seem productive or time well spent, it's a very important part of ensuring the machine's operational integrity. It's important, I think, to reiterate that after each use, always be sure to wipe the slicer down. Proper cleaning should be a daily activity. Not using it continuously, it should be cleaned when you're finished, for instance, at the end of a shift change. According to the FDA, cleaning your slicer every 4 hours is continuous use is recommended. If the slicer's been out of use for an extended period, always clean it before using it. Remember, state and local health codes can often mandate cleaning and sanitizing intervals that you need to be aware of. I think it's important also to continue saying that regarding cleaning, it can be performed by a properly trained end user or operator. Very effective through those cleaning, and the thorough cleaning requires disassembly, cleaning and reassembly. And it varies for each model of slicer. Always refer to the instruction manual and always follow the recommended safety procedures. So we're going to share a video with you after the webinar on how to properly clean your slicer, okay? So, moving on, it not only is cleaning the slicer important, but cleaning and sharpening the knife also helps preserve the operational integrity of the slicer. Using, once again, the HS series slicer as a, with the non-removable knife as an example. First, remove the top knife cover by pulling on the latch knob. The top knife cover is held in place with a strong magnet under the latch knob. Remove the plastic ring guard cover by lifting up. Clean completely around the ring guard by working a moistened folded paper towel between the ring guard and the knife. Then wash, rinse, and sanitize both sides of the knife by wiping outward from the center. Never clean any part of the slicer with steel pads. Like I said earlier, it'll scratch the surface. You don't want to do that. And food debris really shouldn't be allowed to transfer from the knife to the sharpener. That's very important too. So once again, knife sharpening, always clean the blade before sharpening. sharpen the knife only when there is a noticeable decrease in slice quality, because excessive sharpening will prematurely wear out knives and sharpening stones. How long a knife stays sharp is subject to what product being sliced and how long the slicer is used, obviously. If the knife is worn beyond its service life, the slicer may not operate as intended. So the useful life that I referred to can be displayed here in the chart, where once again the various slicer types on the left-hand side, and a new knife will have the various diameters displayed. Diameter of a new knife can be compared then to the minimum recommended diameter of the knife to determine when you should replace your slicer knife to ensure its operational integrity. So it is obviously proper lubrication is very important for the slicer to operate and perform properly throughout its useful life. Using the HS series as an example, proper lubrication obviously is necessary for reliable operation and be performed monthly using Hobart's genuine OEM lubrication products is very recommended. Matter of fact, we've seen lots of situations where vegetable oil or PAM is being used to lubricate, and that could lead to some costly service repair calls when your slicer seizes up. So please use the OEM recommended lubrication. The next slide is where proper lubrication is very important for the slicer to operate and perform throughout its useful life. And want to use the HS series as an example to kind of drive that home. You want to lubricate the carriage slide rod with Lubriplate, FMO 200. Once monthly is recommended. Apply 4 drops directly to the carriage slide rod on each side of the carriage transport. Apply the oil, pull out the telescoping tube on the oil bottle. Believe it or not, that sometimes has to be reiterated, and squeeze gently on the sides of the bottle. Don't, in other words, squeeze it so hard you throw it all over. Applying the oil, move the carriage tray back and forth a few times so oil spreads over the entire length of the slide rod. And then on the meat grip, its slide rod can be lubricated periodically or when any resistance is felt while using the meat grip assembly. So you first wipe the meat grip slide rod, so lubrication is applied to a clean, dry surface. Next, gently squeeze a small amount, once again, of the provided Lubriplate oil on the rod, and then slide the meat grip up and down the rod to restore the smoother operation. This is a good point, or at least a good place in which to describe how to do some visual inspections at least every 6 months. Look for any gaskets or seals that appear to be damaged or missing. Slicer, it really has to be removed from service if you see this, and your Hobart authorized service agent should be contacted for a complete inspection. Obviously, you'll need parts for replacements. If repair is postponed, it could lead to damage to the internal components, like getting moisture behind the bezel or moisture in the bearing. Once again, we'll reiterate not to power wash. It's only because it does have the tendency to happen. Symptoms and troubleshooting. I'm going to examine the ring guard cover, the top knife cover, and the entire slicer, for worn or damaged components before it's used. Never operate the slicer if these defects are observed. Once again, remove it from operation. Contact your authorized Hobart service provider to repair and replace the defective parts with genuine OEM parts. Other symptoms in troubleshooting, if the slicer doesn't start, believe it or not, it's not always obvious. Is the unit plugged in to an operational outlet? Power cord damaged. Once again, call the authorized your service provider if there's abnormal cutting or any abnormal noises that I'd want to at least emphasize that you can really trust OEM Hobart parts to keep equipment and the kitchen running smoothly. They're engineered, so they're specifically designed and engineered for the equipment we make. It really does create better performance for the life of the slicer, as well as greater measures of food safety, which we're all concerned about. I'm not going to read through this entire slide, but I wanted to give you a list of common slicer replacement parts that you could consider as part of your slicer preventative maintenance program. I'm not going to read, as I said, through the entire page, but the recording of the webinar will be available to go back and reference this parts list. You can see that knives, lubricants, sharpening stones, and electrical cords are prevalent maintenance, preventative maintenance parts. So. I also like to just remind everybody that Hobart Service and Hobart Parts is here to answer any questions you have related to your service and parts needs. They can be contacted, each one of them. We have obviously service professionals as well as parts that cover a wide range of models, and we are an ITW company which has coverage for all the brands and logos you see, and these two websites, the hobartservice.com and hobartparts.com, can also be accessed to ask and search for answers to any of your questions. So at this point,
hey Tom, this is Tom Hazelwood. I'd like to interject something about what you said earlier, talking about OEM parts, if that's okay.
Oh, sure, Tom. I forgot to ask you if you have any examples that drive.
Yeah, I have an example, but yeah, the first thing I wanted to say was, man, I liked seeing the poll results. There was like 63% said they cleaned after each use, and I want to know what store you're at, and because I'd like to go to your store and buy a product. I mean, there are some great results there. And one thing, when you're talking about OEM parts, it made me think about one of your slides. You actually said, do not use PAM or vegetable oil. And that takes me back to a service call where I was called out and their slicer was fully locked up, couldn't move it at all. They couldn't move the gauge plate or the slide. And I was talking to the person that was operating it, or wanted to operate it. He couldn't do it anymore. And I asked him about, there was a can of PAM sitting next to him and also some vegetable oil in a gallon jug. And I asked him if he had used that, and he said, yes, I use it every day to help it move. And what happened was it actually seized it up, because the PAM or the vegetable oil actually starts becoming sticky and actually coagulates, kind of like, and it actually seized the whole thing up. I was there for 2 hours on service, charging the customer to free this thing up and take it apart. And I mean, I even had to use a mallet to kind of move things along, and it ended up being very costly. So remember that, guys out there, use the OEM lubrication. It's so important. Yes, vegetable oil will make it feel good for that little bit of time, but it'll be very costly later on when you call me out to to check it out. So I just wanted to interject that, Tom, and
I'm
thanks
glad you
for that
did.
time.
Yeah, I gather you still carry around your mallet, and just in case you have to unsee something else. Thanks, Tom. I appreciate it. Matt, is this an opportunity for you to take over?
Yes, I'll take it from here. Thanks, Tom and Thomas, for sharing your insight and expertise. For everyone joining today's webinar, more information on Hobart will be coming your way in our post-event email, which includes the webinar replay and more maintenance and troubleshooting tips. PartSound is proud to be an authorized distributor of Hobart and your one-stop source for all of your genuine OEM parts, accessories, and consumable needs. Of course, that includes the Hobart lubrication kit that we discussed today. So we have a few minutes left here to share some questions with both Tom Duff and Thomas Hazelwood. So let's get to some that are in the queue from our attendees. Our first question is, are there deli meats or foods that you shouldn't cut in a Hobart slicer?
Hey, great question. All deli type meat, so you know, and cheese, they're able to be sliced, but many people also use slicers for various vegetables, and there's a big however in there. No bone-in type meat should be sliced using a slicer. Like he was saying, I bring my mallet around. You need to use the right tool for the job at hand. Bone-in meat should be cut using a meat saw, and it's kind of like using a pair of channel locks to hammer a nail in. When you do something like that, you can damage the tool, the product, and potentially cause an unsafe situation. So most deli meats and cheese are just fine, just no bone-in. Great question.
Right, we want you to be using the mallet, not the operator.
Exactly.
All right. Well, hopefully you don't have to use it that much. Second question that we have in our queue. How much should you deep clean a Hobart slicer? So I'm guessing deep clean would be one where you would kind of take some pieces apart and thoroughly wash each of them. How frequently should an operator be doing that?
Now, when you follow the guidelines, you've seen a little snippet of it that Tom Duff presented, and the video is really going to help with that on a thorough cleaning. But when you follow those guidelines that you're going to see in the future video and what you heard, if you have thorough cleaning on a regular basis, it'll prevent buildup that could lead to the slicer needing a time-consuming cleaning and sanitization. Just remember that after cleaning with mild soap and water, when you sanitize the slicer, if you're using products besides chlorine, iodine, or quaternary ammonia, be sure that it's formulated to be safe for use on aluminum and stainless, and always follow the EPA registered label use instructions that come with the product. I've actually seen cases where the aluminum on a slicer was damaged because they used a wrong product. So always check if it's safe for aluminum or stainless.
All right, another question we have here, and I think this is a really timely one with some places opening back up or increasing their capacity. Person asked, we have been operating on a limited menu during COVID, so what cleaning or preventive maintenance steps do I need to try in order to get my slicer back in service?
Great question. Yeah, especially in this time. Anytime that there's a span where the slicer has been, not in use and just sitting, maybe covered, you'll always want to thoroughly clean it and lubricate it. Now, be sure to inspect it for damaged or worn parts, like you heard before with Tom Duff. And you may want to consider scheduling a checkup with your local Hobart service. And I just want to kind of give you a case in point. For several years, I was the technician sent out to the auto show in Detroit, and they would have me come out about 3 weeks before the show and complete a checkup on all the equipment. Now, this was so when the show began, all of their equipment was in top shape, and ready for the task at hand. They wanted to make a lot of money without having to worry about a nuisance breakdown. So that's something to consider when you have a piece of equipment sitting for a while.
Another question we have here. I'm having trouble with inconsistent slicing. What does this mean?
You know, if you've already thoroughly cleaned the slicer and have sharpened your knife and you're still seeing like an inconsistent slicing, and like for instance slices that are thin on one side and thick on the other, then you should contact your local Hobart service to diagnose the issue. Many issues like this are preventable by having a regular preventive maintenance set up with a factory-trained Hobart technician. And this kind of preventive maintenance, it goes beyond the standard upkeep and lubrication of a slicer.
All right, I'm looking in our queue, and I think that was the last question we had. Oh, hey, we got a right at the bell. We got an ad in here. What are some other problem signs that we should watch out for with our slicers?
You know, problem signs are any kind of wearing. You always want to look for wearing. Noises that are unusual, like Tom Duff said earlier. If you've had a HS series, you know it's a quiet running machine, and you have the standard noise. If you have any weird noises or drag when you're moving it, loose, you know, things like if you're switching to automatic, you know, from manual and you notice that something's loose, you always want to have that checked out. Any kind of things that are unusual from regular day use. And that's why Tom was saying when you have somebody you want the operator to have read the instruction manual or operation manual. Usually what happens when I used to go out and do startups of equipment, I would be training them on how to use it, and I'd ask them where their operation manual is, and they said, well, we know it came with it, and usually at a new place that was being built, it always ended up in the drawer somewhere that only the manager knew. So always be sure to have operation manuals and know how the unit's running in a normal state, and then when that end user, that operator, notices something that's not normal, they can bring it up to the manager and say, hey, something's happening here. We need to have it checked. Great
Okay,
questions.
I'm looking. Yeah, these were some really good questions. I'm looking at our queue, and it looks like that was the last one we had. So I guess we'll wrap it up here. Thank you again for attending today's webinar, everyone. Make sure to complete the short survey heading your way to let us know what you think. We'd love to offer more events like this in the future, so your feedback will help to inform us of the topics, format, and timing that best meets your needs. Thanks also to our partners at Hobart for your time and valuable information provided today. It was very helpful and very informative. Everyone, have a great rest of your day. Thank you.